This is Dara, and I want to welcome you to my video about building your own snowball debt table. In case you don't know what a snowball is, it's basically a way of paying off your debts. You commit a certain amount of money towards extra towards paying your debts every month, and you pay the minimum on everything except for the smallest. Once the smallest is paid off, you apply that snowball amount plus what you were paying for the smallest to the next largest debt, and so on. And you watch your payments grow as your debts actually get smaller. So I decided that I wanted to create my own. I used this method in the past to pay off some credit cards, and it was really excellent and a good way to think about how to pay off your debts. Unfortunately, I had a string of bad luck, and many of my debts have gone back up. So I'm starting over again, and this time I'm actually gonna, this whole workbook is gonna be about my snowball and my budget. I did the snowball, paid off my debts. My budget was crazy. Then I paid attention to my budget, but I wasn't paying off my debt. So this time I'm going to unite those two things. Anyway, so there are a bunch of great templates out there that you can use that really automate this stuff for you, but I found that it wasn't really working for me because I wanted to get in and make adjustments on the fly. And without setting it up myself, I found it was very difficult to find where I wanted to go in to make those adjustments. So anyway, this is going to be a longer video, so let's just go ahead and get started. Um, so everything that I'm showing you, like I'm using numbers if you haven't noticed, but this will work in Excel, this will work in Google Sheets. The formulas are the same. And in fact, I tried some early experiments on setting this up to be what I wanted it to be in Excel. And the reason that I chose to use numbers instead was I just like the way that I can lay out the different tables and numbers. So there are some columns that I want to hide and show that I don't need to see as I once this is all started. And in Excel, I just had to make sure that other tables that I created wasn't in the same column. So I really like how, on numbers you get to have separate columns, but that's just aesthetics. You can use any spreadsheet program to do this. All right, so number one, before you get started, what you want to do is go out and grab all of your statements from last month. Doesn't matter if you started paying this month. Let's just start as if you haven't. Let's start fresh with what the statement said. You want to get the statements. It's important. The reason for getting the statements rather than just looking at your balance is that the statements will show your interest rate and your minimum payment. And sometimes when we're looking on like the websites or the apps, that we don't get all that information. So the statements always have the interest rate, which seems to be the hardest thing to find. And then you'll see how, like later on, how I made some extra payments, and you'll see how flexible the system is for adding in the payments as you go. So it'll fix the fact that you might not necessarily be in the midst of doing a snowball right now. Um, all right, so let's go ahead and get started. So first, I'm going to track my debts, and I'm just going to make this table a little prettier. Let's see, we want our debts, we want the starting balance, the rate, payments, and then I do this thing, adjusted payment, and I put this column here because I could run the math within my excuse me, I could within my formulas do the math to get that adjustment payment. But I just found that the math was getting really complicated, and actually having that as a separate call out made it easier to think through how I was building my formulas. And in fact, this is probably any of you who had trouble in math in high school, you'll find that maybe many of the reason is that if you use words to state your formula, it's so much easier than if you're just working with the numbers. All right, before I start with that table, I'm actually going to go ahead and make my snowball table because I am going to use that for the adjusted. So snowball. So the snowball is the amount that you're putting aside to pay off these bills each month. It's going to be a set amount, think of it as another bill. You're going to figure out where that money's coming from, and that's what you're going to commit to every month. Now, if you have extra money to dedicate in a month, that's perfect. just go ahead and add that payment in, but this is the amount that you are promising yourself that every month you will pay. Oops, I made that blue and then made it unblue. Okay, I wanted to make the text white. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make all these into numbers, currency, and then I'm going to make the rate into a percentage. And I'm just doing that before I start with the numbers just to make sure that everything's right. All right, so let's say I have a Capital One bill. One. And I like to keep track of a starting balance up at the top because then I can see, if the progress that I'm making, like where I started. And so the adjusted amount is going to be what my minimum payment plus my snowball. So I'm going to make that equals my minimum payment plus snowball. And I don't want this to move, so I'm just going to say reserve. Okay. And next, if you've ever taken a loan, financed a computer at Apple, it was most likely through Barclays Bank. So let's say we bought a laptop. Oh, that's not even a number. Let's give it some change. And let's say their interest rate is 22%. I'm trying to give some of these change just so we're not working with whole numbers because that's silly. All right, so now for the adjustment payment for the Barclays, it's going to be, the snowball plus what I was paying before. So if you remember, this amount is that. It's the snowball plus this payment. So this is going to equal the snowball plus that payment plus the minimum balance. Okay. Let's say we have a Target card. And I'm trying to make this more. What's a good number? 30, 34, 52, and 55 cents. All right, and let's say their interest rate's about 15.2. Oops. Okay, now I can just take this amount, and because I didn't fix these, it's looking above it and it's looking below it. I can just drag this down, and then you'll see this one looks above and looks below it, but next to it, not below. All right, and then because we really love these guys, let's say it's 45, 12, and 70, 20, 27. I happen to know they have a large interest rate. At least I got a large interest rate on the one that I had. Okay. And again, we're just going to take that same formula and pull it down. So that does it for our debts. Actually, go back down. I want to create on this table one footer row. Oops. Add a row. Make that the footer row. All right, and this, I'm going to make this track everything that I have to pay for the month. So when I pull this, I'm going to pull this cell that I create into my monthly budget once I create a monthly budget that shows this is how much to set aside for payments. So total monthly. And it's going to be the sum of everything above, all my minimum payments, plus my snowball. Okay, because remember, we're even though this is, once this Capital One gets paid off, we're still counting that towards what we're putting towards our debt. So this is all the money we're working with plus the snowball. All right, so next we're going to build our amortization table. Let's Same style. Oops. Let's give it a header, rows. Okay. And actually I went to. Okay, so basically what an amortization table is, if you've never heard this phrase, you've probably seen it. It's if you get a loan, at least they used to do, the banks would send you a statement that shows you what all your payments are. So it'll show you, here's what your payment is, this is what's applied towards the interest, this is what applies towards the principal, and here's what applies towards, and here's the balance that you're paying off, and it shows you the schedule. This is typically done with loans, so credit cards, I'm not credit card, car loans, student loans, mortgages, personal loans, etc. It's not typically, banks don't typically send this to you for credit cards because credit cards are variable. You may continue to use your credit card, in which case you're adding to the balance, which would then mess up the schedule. But in a snowball method, we're going to actually show, because our point is to pay it off. And then the way that I'm going to build it, you'll see that it's easy to go in and make an edit if I do happen to use a credit card, or if I do pay extra on a credit card that's not the first in line to get payment. And there might be a reason that I do that. Like if the limit is getting close, I don't want to get over limit fees. So it might be worth it to just put some extra money on a card just to make sure it's not going over limit. Okay, so the first up is our one with our smallest balance. So this is going to be the capital one. So if I was using one of those automated templates, like this would have been it. I would have done that and it'd been done. But then, I couldn't edit the amortization table the way I wanted to. At least I couldn't figure out how to edit it. So that's why I'm building it this way. I'm showing you too how I'm building these, because by showing you how I come up with the formulas and how I fix problems, it'll help you figure out like how you want to build your own table to work with. Maybe you want to do it differently than me, but you'll know how I created my formulas, like the thought process, the logic, so that you can create your own. All right, so to get the dates, I'm going to go ahead and just type the date. And you probably know if I just add this now, it's going to be daily, but I want it to be a monthly pattern. So I want to go ahead and put January. And now if I select both and drag, I'm going to get the monthly. I've skipped this row because I'm going to make this row the starting balance column or row, just to pull it down in here instead of having everything just stay up here. So I'm going to make this equal this, and I want to preserve that column. Okay, so that it won't move around. In this particular instance, it doesn't matter whether I lock that or not, because it's just this one square that's going to have it. I'm not repeating it anywhere, but I'm going to preserve it anyway. All right, so before I start, I want to make sure that everything here is currency. Okay. And because this is my first card that I'm paying off, I'm going to go ahead and grab the adjusted payment. So I'm going to say equals the adjusted payment. And I want to lock that, because when I drag it down, I don't want it to move and start grabbing these. It's got to be the payment for the Capital One card. All right, so interest is simply your previous balance, equals your previous balance times your rate, and now this is an annual rate, which we're going to lock. Okay, so this is an annual rate, so we want it monthly, so divided by 12. And then your principal is this, this, your payment minus your interest, and your balance is your previous balance minus what you paid in principal. Okay, so that is the formula that we're going to use for this for our first card. So let's go ahead and see that payment go down. Boop. All right, so let's do some conditional formatting. So if it's going to be 0 or less than 0, I want that to stand out. So 0, 0. Let's make that gray. Okay, so now we have a problem happening here. There's an error in our formula because if you see here, this last balance is smaller than what our payment was, and so we overpaid. So now we're starting to add money to our card instead of paying off the card, and that's not what we want at all. We want to stop paying once we, once it's paid off. Once we reach 0, we don't want to pay anymore, and we need to make this payment smaller to match what our balance is. So the easiest way to figure out these formulas is to start where the problem was and then apply the formula you create to the rest of the column. Okay, so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to make this an if statement. So if, okay, so the expression we want is if this amount, this balance, is smaller than our adjusted payment. Oops, start over because I didn't mean to click. If expression, this amount is smaller than our adjusted payment, okay, and it's easier to think to false first. So if that's not true, then lock this amount, lock. If that's not true, then we can just apply the adjusted payment. But if it is true, then we want to grab the balance for the payment, and then I add in the interest because if you paid this right on the due date, you probably got charged the interest charge, and that's going to show up on your next bill. So I go ahead and charge, and if my bill comes and I happen to pay it before they dinged me with the interest, then all the better. The balance is 0, and I'll come back and fix that. But otherwise, that's just being proactive. So I'm going to add in that interest, and then boom. So now I've reached 0. So let's apply that down and let's apply that up. Okay, so we're making the snowball payment until we get close to paying off and we pay what we have left over and boom, it's paid off. So that's how we do the first card. That's pretty straightforward. All right, let's do the second card because as we grow to the next one, the math is a little different. So that's why I did 4 cards just to show you how we make the math work past the first one. So this one is going to be the Barclays. Okay, and we're just going to copy these statements. All right, and the balance here, let's move this formatting. We're running out of space. Okay, so the balance is going to be the balance for the Barclays card. Preserve that. Okay, and then the payment. So in this case, I need to grab my formulas from here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my formulas and paste them here. Like what you saw here was just, it's trying to repeat what this row is doing. So that's all kind of nonsense. So we need to take this formula from here and put it here. And now that I grab this formula, I'm actually going to hide the interest and principal columns because I don't need to see those, and I can save some space by just focusing on my payment and my balances. All right, so now this payment is taking the adjusted rate of the Capital One card. So we need to change that, but we don't want the adjusted rate of the Barclays card. Remember, we're supposed to be paying the minimum until this is paid off. So, and otherwise we can't pay all the adjusted rates. That's more money than we have. So I'm just going to make this be the minimum. So we're going to go ahead and change this adjusted rate to the minimum, and again the minimum, and let's lock that. Preserve. Okay, and then the next thing we want to do is make sure that we're grabbing the right interest rate. So grab the Barclays rate and preserve. Okay, and then principal should be right because it's grabbing those two, and balance should be right because it's grabbing the one above and the one beside. Okay, so let's go ahead and drag this down. All right, so this is where the problem is, that I'm not applying what's left over here, and I'm not updating this to then pay off my adjusted payment amount. So we need to redo this formula so that it's not just looking at what my balance was on this side, it's also looking at what my previous balance was for the previous card. So let's go ahead and let's just rewrite this whole formula so we can think through it the right way. All right, so so the first thing I want to look at is if this amount, right, the amount next to it, is less than, so if the capital one balance is less than the capital one adjusted payment, let's lock that. Okay, so now if that's false, that means that we're still paying the minimum on the Barclays card. So if that's false, then we want to pay this, and let's lock that. Okay, but if it's true, then that means we've entered into snowball territory here. So if it's true, we want to make sure that our balance here is not less than what we're paying. So we need to do our second if statement. So if, and our expression is if the balance before, right, is less than the adjusted amount, like that. Okay. All right, so if that's less than, then we want to pay the balance plus that interest, right? Because we said we want to make sure that we want to be proactive and make sure that we don't have a follow-up bill because we paid it off, but the interest had already hit, right? Now, if it's false, then what we want to do is pay the adjusted rate and log that minus whatever was left over from here. So it's not the full adjusted amount, it's the adjusted amount minus what we put towards this last payment. Okay, so if we hit enter, good. So you see our payment went up to 189. And if I drag this formula down, you see it's turned into now my adjustment payment. And if I drag it up, it should stay 82.50. And if I add some rows, then you see, I'm going to go to 0. Here I paid it off. Boom. Okay. So, and let's just, I don't know why the date doesn't also copy down. Right. So now I'm going to do the next card, because the next card is going to have the same setup as this one, but I just want you to see like how this is building. Okay. So again, we're going to create 4 more rows or columns. I know I say rows when I mean column all the time. We're going to copy that, and this is with the target card. Okay. And then I'm going to copy again this formula and apply it here. All right, so now just to get this out of the way, let's go ahead and hide these columns. So, and again, you know, this is part of why I use numbers is that if I was using Excel, I would have hid stuff up here, or I would have just had to put my table somewhere else. So I like the formatting of the page. It's just so much easier. All right, so let's go ahead and fix our formulas so they're pointing to the right thing. So the balance should be the target balance. And the payment, okay, so this is our big formula. So we want to say, instead of looking at the capital one payment, we want to look at the Barclays payment. That's the previous card we were working with, right? So let's take this out and change it to the Barclays and preserve that. And now, because we're working on Target's card, we want to take that out and change it to the adjustment for the Target. Okay, and this was also the adjusted pay for Target. And then this one is going to be the minimum for the Target. And make sure you lock these, because if you don't, you're going to get, actually, let's not lock one and just show you how it goes crazy. Enter. And, oh, that's funny, that one didn't go crazy. Oops. Oops. Let's not lock this one. Oh, because I haven't put my formulas down. So let's pull the formulas down. Because remember, that's that garbage that's copying over from this. And you can see that it went wrong. So let's go ahead and make sure these are preserved. Okay, and pull that down. Boom. All right, so now we also want to make sure we're doing the right interest rate. Remember, this is going to be the Barclays rate, and we need the target rate. And preserve that. Okay, and let's drag that down. Okay, and then we already dragged these down. So this should be the principal, and this should be the balance going down. Okay, and as you see here, it's picking up that same thing. It's been paying the minimum, and then it sees, oh, there's more money available. So it moves it over, and then it's paying that adjusted balance. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add the last card in, and this just helps you to refresh your memory for what we did here, and make sure that you've got it. So we're going to again add the 4 columns. Okay, and I want to copy this to here. I want to grab my formulas. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and hide these 2 columns to get them out of the way. Okay, so let's go ahead and update this information. So again, this is going to be the balance for the Best Buy card. And then this is going to be, again, so before it was talking about Barclays, about the Target card. So we look to the Barclays balance to figure out what we need to do with the Target card, if we need to adjust a payment or if we need to make a regular payment. So I want to switch this now to the Target adjusted balance, right? Because that's the card we're talking about beforehand. And again, preserve those rows. And then I want to change this now to the the Best Buy adjusted balance. And again, the adjusted balance. And because everything else is moving, like I don't have to move these, they're doing it on their own. So now I'm going to make this the minimum payment for Best Buy. Okay, and then I need to also update my interest rate. Okay, now again, principal should be looking next to it, balance should be looking above and next to it. So let's go ahead and drag these down. Oh, that means I didn't lock something. Yep. I didn't lock the Best Buy payments. And boom. Okay, we're back. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and drag this down. So you see again, it's I guess it's still making the payments there. So let's drag this down to 180. Okay, so here we paid off the Target card and you see it's picked up that Snowball amount. And just to note, like, when we started this, our Snowball amount that we were applying was 225, and you can see here the Snowball amount we're now applying is 565 and 50 cents. So you can see how these payments are growing. So, and at the same time, we've paid off 3 cards. So this is a really great way to think about paying these debts off. So, okay, that takes me to the 0. All right, and I'm just going to leave that buffer row there. All right, so now let's go ahead and hide these 2 because again, I don't need to see the interest and principal as I'm working. I just need to see the payments and balances. But of course, they're still there. So if you wanted to unhide, you can unhide all or just unhide the columns hidden beneath where you've selected. All right. So now I can go about my way and I could just, follow this guide to pay off my debts. But it so happens that this month I had some extra money come in and I went ahead and I applied that extra money to some of my cards. So, and I didn't apply it based off the minimum I had. I did pay off the Capital One, yay, and I took some of that money towards the Barclay. And then I would take some of the money towards the Target, which was close to balance. So that's the reason for not applying it all. But really, ideally, if I had paid this off, then anything left over should go towards here. Okay. The other thing that happened was then I had to use one of my cards. So let's say I'm going to use the Barclay card. That balance is actually going to go up. So let's show how that's going to work. So I'm just going to override this payment. So instead of paying the Snowball amount, I'm paying what my balance was. So 760.73. So this is a thing that I couldn't do in the other templates that I found online that were automated. I had a lot of problem kind of coming in and doing these quick edits the way I wanted to show my actuals versus the plan. So now it shows that in here, and when I made this payment, I didn't account for interest charge. I just paid the balance. So there's a chance that it's going to come back to me next month with this balance. If it comes back and there's no payment next month, I'll just zero this out. Okay, so now here, because now you see, because I did this, it kind of made this equation that I had funky, but that doesn't matter because I had actually paid 400 on this card. Okay, so boom, that fixes that problem of, I could do it a different way. I could put that minimum payment back in there. Like, let's say I did do this way, that I paid this card off, but my function is freaking out because it says, oh, well, I have less left over, because remember, this right here says the adjusted payment minus whatever I paid here. So it's like freaking out and going, oh, well, you didn't pay that. So I could just come in here and say, well, it should have been the minimum here, right? I could just overwrite that and that'll fix my whole template. But I actually did pay more. So I paid 400 there. Okay. Now at the same time, I spent here. So let's say this went up. I can just write the amount, or I could do the math. Let's write the amount. So let's say this went up an extra $2,000. No, 200. $2,000 is a significant difference in 200. What were you buying? Another computer. Okay, so You see how this is now for me, it's very malleable because each month I can come in here and I can give the actuals and I can update, the payments I've made, and I can update any balances that have gone up. And I can see here like, okay, I'm making negative progress. So if I had down here went out and bought some big computer, I can actually see that impact and I'll see that, what I've got down here is different than my starting balance, which is going the wrong way. So anyway, that's how I've put together my table. Of course, there's, unfortunately, a lot more debts than that because I never named this as Best Buy. I got a house and a car, so all those things, student loans, they're like death and taxes, right? Student loans never seem to go away. But with this plan, yes, I will get there. I can also see when these dates should be paid off. So by, you know, June of next year, oh, you know what? I did something weird. I counted the date thing wrong. I was going to say that seems really soon. Okay, so here it says if I kept to this plan and I didn't add more debt, I should be paid off all my bills in December 2020. Right. And hopefully I've gotten more money along the way that I can throw at this debt and knock it out even faster. But anyway, that is how I've built my spreadsheet. I'm going to go ahead and take this amount, this square, and apply that to my budget so they can see that money go into my budget every month. And then I'm going to take the leftovers of my budget and hopefully apply that to an extra bit of Snowball for the following month. Instead of saving, let me just pay off the bill. I've got like 401k savings and that kind of thing. So instead of putting stuff to my savings, other than that emergency fund that you have to build, this is exactly how I'm going to tackle this debt. So I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. Take care. Till next time.